Hi, welcome to another episode of Paducah Human Rights Commission television show, Raising the Standard. I am Commissioner Shalon Jeter. I have some very interesting guests on the show today. We have the Paducah City Police Department here, and we will be talking about minority recruitment. And I have a co-host, Commissioner Gary Reese. And welcome, Gary, to the show.
Glad to be here.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
My name's Gary Reese. I actually served in law enforcement for 28 years, worked with these gentlemen here, and I retired, and I've been teaching here at West Kentucky Community and Technical College. I'm an associate professor of criminal justice. So
all right.
Glad to be here.
And we just love Gary on our board. He's a very active member on the board. But we're going to jump right into the show. We have Captain David White here and Chief Brandon Barnhill. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're glad you could take time out of your busy days. We're going to go ahead and let Gary just begin, since he's retired from the police department, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just jump in with our officers
I'd be glad
today.
to. One of the national issues that's come about in the last several months, and it's probably been an issue for quite some time, but it's just came to light in regards to the Ferguson, Missouri, and the New York City Police Department. Some of the turmoil and issues that have gone on there. One of the things that has come out is that there seems to be an underrepresentation of minorities, not just in police departments, but in government as well. Is this something that we see here in Paducah?
Well, first off, let me say thank you for having us on the show. We appreciate that. We appreciate any opportunity that we can go out and make sure that the community understands what we are doing behind the scenes.
Oh, you're welcome.
To your question, yes, minority officers within a police department is very, very important. Essentially, a department should mirror the demographics of the community that they work within. Mm-hmm. Currently, we do not. We have struggled for a few years to recruit, retain, and train, all the way up through the ranks, minority officers. But this is not a new problem. Paducah is not unique in dealing with this issue. You can look back to the 60s, to the race riots and the Kerner Commission report that come out of that. Minority recruitment for police departments was very, very important to them. Right. And it was an important issue at that point. So knowing the history of that, not ignoring the history, how do we build upon that? And I think that's what we've tried to do over years and years. And in 2012, Captain White led a task force to try to understand, dig in a little bit deeper to the issues that we face here locally. And in doing so, I think we've identified some key areas. One of the resounding areas to focus on is dealing with the youth. Mm-hmm. Start at an early age to break down the barrier. And I think we're making some progress. It's baby steps. We can't flip the switch and make it all go away. The history of law enforcement, the history of those race riots and those things from the 60s and 70s that tend to plague us. But we do have to look to the future and realize that there are steps that we can take in making it better, and we're willing to do that.
I think that was one of the things that came out of the Martin Luther King luncheon that was mentioned is trying to look forward and not get stuck in the past, but trying to move forward and see what we can do.
Right.
You mentioned the Minority Recruitment Committee, and I was actually a part of that as well as several others. Can you tell me or address just a little bit about what came out of that committee and what are some of the things that committee found, and then what if anything, and I'm sure the department's tried to make several strides, I know that, what strides the department's made to try to get past those obstacles?
Yeah, I can take that, Chief. The minority recruitment plan came about early 2012. We set as a priority, and I helped author an executive action plan on that, just to outline some of the steps that we've done. And the steps involved having a community-based forum, which we held in 2012. And we also replicated that community forum that was open to the general public with young people in particular. We met at the Oscar Cross Boys and Girls Club and had the recruiters act as facilitators there and basically ask very similar questions about why they may or may not be interested in law enforcement as a career choice. We also had a roundtable for local law enforcement from around our area. We had pretty good participation with that, with Bowling Green, Owensboro, and some of these other communities that also struggle, like the Chief had mentioned earlier, to recruit minority candidates. And so we brought all those together. And to frame all that together, we had a minority recruitment committee made up of several folks, yourself included, like you had mentioned. And essentially what came out of it was we needed to start focusing on younger people. And of course, part of that strategy means getting involved in their lives. And so we looked for ways, creative ways that we could get involved in young people's lives and build a better relationship over time. Of course, the problem with that part of the strategy is the fruits of your labor don't pay off until a little bit further down the road. So we recognized right off the bat that we also needed a multi-tiered strategy. But as far as the young people, the recruiters actually came up with the idea of having a junior citizen police academy. For those that might not be familiar, we have a citizen police academy that's been going for a number of years now, where citizens can come in and take part, and it's a 10-week program. They come and learn more about law enforcement, and we open our doors and let them see what the different aspects of police work involve. And so what we did is we opened that up for people under the age of 18. And we've had really good reception with it. We actually got a grant from the BNSF Railroad to help support that last year for $2,500, which also helped T-shirts, books and materials, fun activities for the kids, that sort of thing. We also brought back the Explorer program, the Law Enforcement Explorer program associated with Boy Scouts of America, and it had kind of fallen the wayside over time. It takes a lot of commitment from some of our officers to be the mentors in that, but we brought it back and it's starting to grow again. And so we use the Junior Citizen Police Academy program to feed kids that are interested and want to make more commitment into the Explorer program. And so we're doing that. We of course attend all the college career fairs that we can, and we've tried to expand our reach on that and also reach out more to military folks as well.
I do have a question. With the kids at the Oscar Cross, when you met with them, and you said that some of the kids, what were their answers? You said you asked them would they want to be police officers. I'm curious to know just what were some of those answers that they said. Do they have a good vision, a good view of what a police officer does, and you know what I mean?
They were probably more positive than what some people might think, but at the same time, they looked at it, I think, probably the same as a lot of the young people look at it, like that's a really tough career choice. Right. You know, there's personal danger and some of these basic things that you would expect younger kids to say, you know, the elements of the danger. Some of the older kids, well, you work all the time, shift work and those sorts of things, so they start recognizing some of that. But overall, it gave us a very good, kind of like a bird's eye view, you know, from the kid perspective, you know, of how they looked at policing as a career choice. And so it also let us know what they don't know about policing. Right. And so I think the Junior Citizen Police Academy program helps us kind of get in there and show them this is really more what policing is. Because if you just watch television shows or you listen to the news, you kind of get a skewed view of what it's actually like. Exactly.
And that program sounds like it's a really good program to give the kids and basically the citizens a different view of the police officers. You know, they're just not people with badges waiting to get you. You know, they're really active. They're trying to, they want you to see them in a different view. So I think that's very good.
Yeah, see the officers are real people.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
I think that, and you mentioned this, and I think it's very interesting that you realize you have to go way back. And one of the study that I've seen recently shows there's a big gap between college readiness with African Americans, especially the males, and other races in this area. Do you see that as a problem for minority recruitment?
Yes. You know, I mean, education is key. You have to graduate high school or have a GED to be a police officer. We prefer to have officers with some college experience that can be substituted for military experience, but I think that is key. Chief wants to respond to that as well.
I would agree with Captain White's comments. I would only take it one step further, that I think in looking at the readiness as far as our testing, so for example our written testing, two common areas kind of speak to us. That is the grammar portion of it and the reading portion of it. So I would kind of summarize it to say I think the readiness is we're falling short somewhere. Yeah. I'm not sure where that gap is. I'm not sure where that fix can be. You know, our focus should be put towards fixing that. But I do realize that in preparedness and coming out and taking the written test, and if you correlate those two, coming out of a high school, there's a distinct area there that we've got to put some attention towards.
Do you think that maybe some of these programs you have with the Junior Police Academy and some other things, you think that might be something that might help? You know, because I know it's not your place to emphasize education and all that, I understand that, but do you think that might be something that might help?
I think it will. I think it does. You know, we've already had a handful of classes through the junior CPA. I think the underlying core of what we're trying to present to these kids, though, is the value of education as a whole.
Right.
You know, we're saying this is important. They need to understand it's important. The community's coming behind us, reiterating the same facts.
Right.
You know, reading is important at a very young age. And we use the term around the agencies, readers are leaders. You know, because if you're always reading something, if you're spreading your mind a little bit, if you're growing, if you're thinking about different perspectives of different things, it is allowing you to think differently and open your mind to different avenues, especially when you can improve yourself that way.
Okay, I mean, this does answer some questions that we have, and as far as the community. But one of the concerns nationwide is the use of force by the police. So could you please explain your policy regarding that? I guess if somebody was stopped, you know, I guess what is the protocol? I think is what I'm trying to say.
Well, we can just start with a basic definition of use of force. And at the Paducah Police Department, and I think you'd find it very similar in other agencies, we consider the use of force, or some agencies, ours included, use the term response to resistance. But we consider that anything above normal handcuffing.
Okay.
So if you tell someone to turn around, put their hands behind their back, and you put them in handcuffs, that's not a use of force. But if you have to use any level of force above normal handcuffing, then we consider that a use of force, and we require a report for that. And so any officer involved has to use the standardized form that we have that tracks a lot of different stats off of that and gives us a basic description of what happened and the officer's response to the resistance that they met. Just a few statistics about that locally. At the Paducah Police Department, we make about 2,700 arrests a year. And just for instance, in 2013, we had 33 incidences of use of force.
Wow.
And so a very small percentage of arrests, and this is something I think is a misconception in a lot of people's mind, is police really don't use force in that many incidences of arrest.
And I think you make the analogy, and as maybe crude as it is, you make the analogy to an airplane collision or an airplane crash. You normally don't hear about every flight that takes off and lands successfully every day.
Right.
And we know those are done thousands and thousands of times. Use of force, unfortunately, is there. It's in the force continuum of every police department, but you only hear about those negative incidents. We have, as Captain White mentioned, the number is very, very high in the amount of arrests that we make daily, monthly, yearly. But the actual use of force is very, very small. And unfortunately, those incidents where you know, a higher degree of force has to be used is what catches the attention of the media.
Exactly.
And one thing that will hopefully come out of Ferguson and some of these other recent incidences is a better national reporting of use of force, particularly deadly force. And so I think in the end, that's something that law enforcement will see as a profession come out of the events of last year, is a better sense of reporting. But with that, and we have a slide that I think we're going to put up here in just a second, but nationwide, as far as deaths by law enforcement, just to get a wrangle on those numbers and to get that out there, the Department of Justice tracks that number, and they add some caveats to it about the fact that we don't have a good system yet of reporting, but they try to do their best efforts, the folks with the Department of Justice. And there is a report out there where they covered a 7-year period from 2003, I think, through 2009, somewhere like that. So a fairly recent study that showed there's 98 million arrests over that time frame. And out of the 98 million arrest incidences, there was 2,931 deaths.
Wow.
from homicide. And yes, it's classified as a homicide when an officer has to shoot someone. That's how DOJ classifies it. And that came out in the media, and some people were kind of like, homicide, you know, they were confused by that. But that is how it gets reported as far as officer-involved shootings at a point of arrest. But just to get that number out there again, 2,931 out of 98 million arrests.
Well, the Paducah Police Department has for some time had a mechanism for, I know you have the use of force reports, then you have a mechanism for investigating those things. So is that something you feel like that the Paducah Police Department is kind of on the cutting edge of? Is that something that you all have, but maybe that's not a nationwide system with other departments? Could you address that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's specifically a cutting edge, you know, if they're in the front or if we're a leading agency. I like to think that we're very proactive. But what I would say is that most agencies, or some agencies, do not put the emphasis on that that we do at our agency. We want to know when the community feels like they've been wronged. We want to know that. That's our job to understand that. The first step in doing so is for them to report that to us, report it to the field supervisor. They're in direct connection with or direct supervision of that patrol officer, and they know usually what's happened. In a large percentage of those cases, my general consensus is it's a lack of understanding.
Right.
A lot of times when we sit down with the aggrieved party, we give the understanding of why we do what we do and why this incident kind of led to where the end result was. Although it might not have been pretty, there are certain circumstances that were contributing factors to kind of put us down that road and ultimately end up in that use of force.
Okay.
Yeah, and to go along with what the chief said, that use of force form, the report, gets reviewed by the immediate supervisor, and then it goes up our chain of command. So it goes all the way up to his desk and gets signed off on, and then it comes to me under professional standards for a final review before we file it. Of the 33 incidences we had last year, just to back up just a little bit, 26 of the 33 involved what we would identify as soft empty hand. That means that we didn't strike anybody with a closed fist, we didn't hit them with a baton or do anything other than grab them and wrestle them to the ground or whatever it takes, you know, to get the handcuffs on them, but not actually physically strike them with anything or use pepper spray or tasers or anything like that. So that kind of helps you understand the numbers a little bit more.
Well, how long have you been, I guess, educating the community? Really this year, it seems like it's the first time, well, last year, it seems like the first time I've really seen the police department kind of active in the community, trying to go to some of these functions. Has this always been going on, or is this something new that you've just started in the last few years?
Well, let me back up real quickly. The Citizens Police Academy is in its it would be coming up in its 21st year this August. So we have had the mechanism there to try to gain that community relationship, partnership, and education all in one. The emphasis, I think, maybe that you're referring to is being more involved in community events and programs like that. We've been doing that for several years now. I would say at least a good 10 to 15 years. We think it's important for the community to know who we are. We think it's important for us to know the key members in the community that obviously have a strong voice and have a driving motivation to do what's right in this community and make it better. We as an agency can't do that alone, so it requires that partnership, walking hand in hand towards an issue, confronting it, dealing with the good and the bad, and making sure that we're all on the same page so we can get it resolved.
Right.
One thing to add to that too, though, is our level of transparency. We report regularly our use of force in our annual report. It's available to all citizens, available on our website, paducahky.gov. You can go on there and you can see a summary of our uses of force over the year. And if you look around other law enforcement agencies, you don't necessarily find that with all agencies. But we're very open about it.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on to the show. We're going to have to take a break right now. Captain White, thank you so much for coming on. I think Chief Barnhill, you're going to be back on the second half?
Be glad to.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Raising the Standard. I am Commissioner Shalon Jeter, and I have our guest here, Chief Brandon Barnhill and Officer Gretchen Morgan with the Paducah Police Department. And I also have our co-host, Commissioner Gary Reese. So we just welcome back, you guys.
Glad to be here.
And Officer Morgan, this will be your first segment, so we have a lot of questions for you as well. Commissioner Reese, why don't you just start with the questioning with our guests?
Okay, all right. If you don't mind, Officer Morgan, would you just explain your position?
Sure.
Briefly.
I am the Community Resource Officer, newly appointed by Chief Barnhill. I'm the liaison between the community and the police department to kind of show you what the police department has to offer, presentations and stuff like that.
Okay, all right. Well, there seemed to be, especially in the last several months, in the national media particularly, seems to report there's a widening gap between the races, basically, and more specifically the minority community and the police department, and I think government in general. Overall, how do you feel that situation is in Paducah as far as the relationship between the communities and including the minority community and the police department?
Well, in my opinion, and I've been here for a handful of years now, and growing up in this community, I think it's better than it probably ever has been. Now, I will stop short of saying that it's perfect where it needs to be. So I think there's plenty of room for growth. I think part of it comes down to, or the basic principle comes down to, is the golden rule. I think regardless of skin color, social status, any of those common factors, you look at that person and understand that they're a human being. You treat them the same as anybody else. And we were going to, from the department standpoint, we ask to be treated the same. We want to be treated fairly. I don't, it's just a job that we're doing. Unfortunately, sometimes that means telling somebody no, or telling someone that they don't like, or taking their rights away from them. So if you use the underlying principle of the golden rule, just treating everybody fairly and consistently, then they understand that, some things are going to have to happen. Sometimes they're going to be told no. Sometimes they're going to have to go to jail and those type things. So the race relations specifically to the Paducah community are very, very good. I think from a department standpoint, there's plenty of room for growth. We continue to educate and inform people of our outreach, what we want, what programs we have to offer, and how we can partner with them to make that bond stronger.
Well, Officer Morgan, are there any other things that you're doing as far as community relations with all races in the community?
Sure, we have a lot of programs that we offer. I know Captain White mentioned our CPA program and our junior CPA, which are the Citizens Police Academy and the Junior Citizen Police Academy. A graduate from the Citizens Police Academy can go on and do our VIPS program, which is Volunteer and Police Services. That's just kind of some extra eyes and ears out there for us on big events like Barbecue on the River and things like that. These volunteers help us just kind of do crowd control, let us know if something's going on. We also have the Explorer posts that he said. We do Coffee with a Cop. We do that 4 times a year. That's kind of an informal setting where people can just sit down with us and just talk with us on a one-on-one basis. A lot of times when we interact with the community, it's a bad situation or a high-stress situation, and just to sit down and have a drink, have a cup of coffee with someone in an informal setting can go a long ways.
Okay, that Coffee with the Cop. Do you advertise that when you're doing that?
We do. We advertise it on the media, television, radio, our Facebook page. We get it out there.
Okay, with that program right there, how many minorities show up? Approximately. I know you probably couldn't tell me a number. Do you get a good number?
Largely in part, we probably haven't seen the minority numbers that we would like to see. Some of that is depending on which part of town that we go to. We try to move it around the town, around Paducah, different locations. Primarily it's in the morning. And we just kind of break down the barriers and just essentially pull the uniform off, and human to human. We just want to say, hey, here's who we are. Ask us anything. We're available to you. How can we help you and work better together?
Okay, okay. Again, the Coffee with the Cop, we're going to get off this in a second, but the Coffee with the Cop, where do you have that event? Do you go to a church? Do you go to some type of civic center?
Our last location was Hardee's on Broadway, and then our next location, which should be coming up pretty soon, I don't have the exact date, will be at Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
So just kind of an informal setting where you can sit down, maybe have some breakfast, and just relax and have casual conversation.
Okay, with the volunteer program that you have, how many more minorities show up for that?
I don't believe we have very many in our VIPS program. I think that's what she's talking about.
Yeah, if you're referring to the VIPS
Yes, the
program, we
VIPS.
have very, very few. The CPA program, which is where the VIPS program kind of draws from, we usually have a class of 20 to 25, somewhere in that range, and about 10% or so are usually minorities.
Okay.
I want to touch just very briefly on this idea of stop and frisk.
Sure.
And that's become a phrase or byword or whatever you want to call it nationally. I don't remember ever having any issues related to that here. But if you don't mind, I know particularly it was in New York City. Can you explain just briefly what stop and frisk is? And I know there has to be some requirements, some legal justification before a person is actually stopped and or frisked. Could you just briefly explain what that is? And how you all monitor, how you might monitor that, and if someone feels like they have a complaint in regards to that, how would that be handled?
Okay. Stop and frisk is the term that came out of the 1968 Terry v. Ohio case. Essentially what that says is you have to dissect the stop and the frisk portion of that. The stop is one portion, and the frisk is obviously the continuation of that stop. So you have to look at it and you have to have reasonable suspicion to do so. An officer has to have articulable facts that says, based on where they're at, what part of town, time of day, based on the crime that has been being committed in that community or what have you, that officer can articulate that this person may be up to no good, essentially is what it is in layman's terms. Communication starts. Usually the officer wants to go up and say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing. This is why I'm in this part of town, and this is why I'm stopping you. Just to ask you a few questions. The frisk at that point has to be a continuation based on the conversation and the facts that led to the stop. I think unfortunately where we get sideways sometimes is the communication is not there. Either officers don't do a good job of communicating why they're doing what they're doing, what facts led them up to being in that part of town and stopping that individual. And then from the individual standpoint, they have to understand that the officer has the right to do so. The officer has the right, based on law, to take those next steps further and to move towards what would be the frisk portion of that. Currently where we come from and what you're talking about, a couple of the more recent incidents that have gotten national attention is that the lack of understanding that the individual does not have a constitutional right to resist arrest. They do have the right to argue their case in court, but whenever the stop is conducted, if it's legal, if it's reasonable, the officer conducts the frisk, and at that point moves further to the arrest. That arrest has to take place. That individual does not have that right to resist. And had that been done in those two instances, then I think maybe there would be different outcomes.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. And Officer Morgan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And Chief Barnhill, thank you for being on the show.
Very
and Commissioner Reese, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We're going to have to sign off. If you ever feel like you've been discriminated against, please don't hesitate to call our office at 270-444-8643, and we will take care of you. Other than that, we're going to have to sign off. I hope to see you again. In the meantime, we're going to just keep chatting because this is good.